Welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
No, I'm here, man. I was trying to find the article that we were just talking about because I didn't pull that one up ahead of time. But yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to talk about that one too. So I'm here, man. I'm here. I'm definitely here.
Definitely here. You sure?
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh,
100%. 100%.
I think honestly, after the last 2 nights of trying to do this, it feels like 110%. You know what I mean?
110%.
Yeah.
Ready.
This is
ready.
This is the way the internet is supposed to work. Like, we're having a real conversation. I can gauge your reactions. I can time my way into your sentences. You know what I mean? Like, it's
perfect. Right. Instead of like me saying something and you hearing it 10 seconds later.
It was brutal, man. It was brutal. Yeah. And like I said, I paid for the good internet too. But I saw right at 8:55 of 2 busloads. I'm outside having a last cigarette before the show. 2 big, huge busloads filled with kids, all walking out with iPhones in their hands. And I'm like, this is going to be a train wreck. It is going to crush even my extra cost internet. And it did. It fucked it right up.
Yeah. So sorry for not being able to do the show last night, folks, or even on Tuesday. On Tuesday, I was the problem. I just we were just having some issues getting our toddler to bed, and my wife kind of was like, "Nope, I need help."
Help? You cannot do your show, Kevin.
Yeah, no, you do this. I'm like, it's not gonna work. Wasn't feeling good anyway, so I was like, all right.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about Tim and I did a bunch of research for this too. We're excited to do this show.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about whether or not the economy is actually good. I titled this show, "Are We Too Dumb to Realize the Economy is Great?"
That's a perfect title for it. Really.
I mean, like, and I've seen a whole bunch, like the pro-Biden Democrats, like that's their talking point the last couple of days.
Oh, it's brutal. It's brutal.
Yeah, it's just like, no, you morons are just too dense and too beholden to Trump to know that the economy's like doing great. And I want to examine that. I'm like, okay, like there's some stuff that's kind of weird with like statistics. I get it, but let's examine like what things look like. I think I'm a bit more optimistic than you are, so we're gonna have some back and forth on that.
But. Yeah, no, I sense that we're a bit divergent on this topic. So I went after some information to back my play because it's something that I bring up regularly. I've been kind of trying to persuade you that I'm correct. I don't think where you and I really do well is that I do go too far, and then you don't go far enough. So it works out. You know what I mean? Like, we're a good counterbalance for each other. And I think that is actually an important part of civil discourse, part of having discussions with your friends. And I think you and I do a good job of that for our libertarian community and hopefully for our, like our conservative friends and some of our liberal friends. They need to kind of see that we don't agree on everything and that we'll hopefully get through it without screaming at each other.
We can have a discussion about it, pull some data into this, see if we can like get closer to figuring it out, right?
Yeah, brother, I got a wild source for part of our discussion. You're going to be like, what?
Right. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's going to be
funny. You've teed it up.
Yeah.
So this is what we're going to talk about today, folks. Mostly this. We have a few other things we could chat about too, like a poll that came out in New York State, and some interesting results there. So we'll go over that if we end up having time. But let's go in 10 seconds and get this started. 5, 4, 3, 2.
Now, an hour of clarity for exhausted people of our nation mired in toxic partisanship. Left versus right, us versus them. While we pay to keep our politicians fighting, how do we, the people, rise up and solve the great challenges of our time? We do it by embracing freedom and liberty. There may be no such thing as a free lunch, but this hour is as close as it gets. Welcome to A Free Solution.
Welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
I'm here, brother. I'm fresh off the road. I've been traveling the Northeast for project management type responsibilities. I am so glad to be home and broadcasting from my regular home base. I have 200 window screens opened up. I see no lag in our communication system. I'm very happy to be here, and
Right.
it's good to see you, brother. It's good to see you.
Absolutely. It's good to see you, and it's good to hear the sound of your voice, more than or less than 10 seconds from when I can see your lips moving.
Yeah,
It's
we
great.
gave it a shot, man. Guys, we did. We tried
tried.
hard. A busload of kids showed up. They all like clamber off, 2 busloads of kids. They all have iPhones in their hands, and I'm like, they're taking the internet out in this whole building. I know it.
Yeah, and folks, if you listen to WYSL, sorry for this. It's just we had technical difficulties when we were trying to do our live stream show, which is normally great. And again, WYSL audience, if you listen to this on the radio, and then we do things like if you leave a comment, we put it up on screen, we talk about it. You hear that during the show. We talk during breaks. Sometimes our discussions aren't quite over yet, but we're limited by a time frame that WYSL has for us. And it's a way you get a bit more extra content. So it's worth checking out if you can. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, etc. YouTube. I think YouTube is actually where we have the most active comment section. Anyway, so what we want to talk about today, though, besides complaining about Tim's internet, was we want to talk about the state of the economy. And it's interesting because there's kind of 2 things that prompted this for both of us. One is I saw this tweet going around from Tim's favorite person, Nina Turner, about the cost of living in all 50 states, right? And I just thought it was a bit ridiculous. I'm gonna show it for our online audience. I'll describe it to you for the radio audience. And then the other thing is, a new poll came out that asked Americans, what they thought of the state of the GDP, unemployment rate, and the stock market. And Democrats are freaking out about it. Just basically, like, I named this episode, "Are We Too Dumb to Realize the Economy is Great?" And like, unironically, that is what like pro-Biden Twitter looks like right now.
It really does. And as you know, Kevin, that's something that kind of makes me a little tiny bit insane. It's like the dictates that we're experiencing a perfect economy or a great economy from the powers that be that are disconnected from the economic reality of the individual is problematic for me. And Brian Stelter lecturing me on what I should understand about what my economy is doing, literally break out the duct tape, man, because my head wants to explode.
So actually let's start with that, because I think we start with that, then we can talk about like the actual cost of living stuff, right? So we'll talk about the macro numbers first. I know you love talking about this, but so there's a poll that just came out, the Harris Guardian poll, and it says that 55% of Americans think the economy is shrinking, 56% think the US is experiencing a recession. In recession is defined by 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. 49% believe the S&P 500 stock market index is down for the year. It's actually kind of the highest it's ever been, honestly. Stock market's like factually doing great, but 49% of Americans think it's down. And then 49% believe that unemployment is at a 50-year high. But it's actually at 3.6%, which is an historic low, based on, I think with the U3 numbers. But so the reason why they're freaking out is like, okay, why does everyone think that the economy is bad? The economy looks so good. GDP is going up. It's like I think the Q1 estimate for 2024 is like 1.6%. It's not stellar, but it's going up. GDP, of course, being the measure of all activity in the economy, including government spending, which is something like 30% of GDP overall. And it is going up. The stock market is actually doing great. Like, it's very high, and unemployment appears low. So Tim, like, you are a bit more sour on the economy. You're not really believing these numbers. So why shouldn't we believe that the economy is great? And are we just too brainwashed or partisan to realize that the economy is good? We just hate Joe Biden so much that like we're willing to like ignore reality in this situation.
So first of all, that's a great way to frame the question. And the issue that I find is that when we talk about metrics, and I've explained this on other shows, but I think I'm going to turn to a little different source than I would normally turn to for a discussion of what GDP actually is. Okay. And so I, Kevin, went to the World Economic Forum and
Whoa.
found and I found an article by David Pilling, the Africa editor of the Financial Times, and he's broken down a take on GDP that I think our listeners are going to find interesting, and it certainly is in line with the problems that I see with claiming that the economy is great because of GDP. Now that's one specific issue that you brought up, and so I feel like I'm going to attack the GDP for a few minutes and see what we get. We'll start with, and again, I'm referring. It's a great article by David Pilling. I'll share a link to it. GDP's inventor, Simon Kuznets, was adamant that his measure had nothing to do with well-being. But we too often confuse the two. For 7 decades, gross domestic product has been the global elite's go-to number. Fast growth, as measured by GDP, has been considered a mark of success in its own right, rather than a means to an end, no matter how the fruits of that growth are invested or shared. If something has to be sacrificed to get GDP growth moving, whether it be clean air, public services, or equality of opportunity, then so be it. So you see, this guy took a path that maybe I wouldn't, but right there.
Like, okay, it sounds like communist propaganda, sir.
Well, in a way, right. And there are points when I discuss my economic realities and my economic interpretations that I think communists get things right. Now, I'm very proud of the United States record as a clean producer and manufacturer. And I think that one of the problems with growth in manufacturing in the United States is that we're a little bit regulatory burdened and overtaxed compared to the rest of the world. Like, we could do better making more stuff here, and we would be kinder to the environment. So I don't think that the commies get that right. Okay. But where this guy gets it right? What is so gross about gross domestic product? Gross domestic product is a gross number. It is the sum total of everything we produce over a given period. It includes cars built, Beethoven symphonies played, broadband connections made, but it also counts plastic waste bobbing in the ocean, burglar alarms, petrol consumed, and I would add like medical care, college costs, and rent. Things that are growing exponentially faster in cost than inflation, and they get mismeasured because they have a dramatic impact on a certain segment of the population, the lower middle class and the poor. Okay. And so when we leave those realities out, that certain things are growing faster inside of an aggregate number like GDP, that's where people can feel like they're in a recession themselves, regardless of what the gross domestic product is saying. Okay. So what do you think about those two issues that I presented there, or the issue I'm presenting there?
Yeah. So you know what, like your take, and at least, well, it's not fully your take, but the one that you've given here is reminds me of this discussion I had, like, gosh, it must have been 5 years ago. It was before COVID, where I had a guy on and we were discussing the book Donut Economics, and basically it's similar to that, where GDP, in that it measures things that have a negative externalities, is a problematic measure of the health of the economy, because it measures things like pollution, and it measures things like, rents going up or whatever, right? The thing is like it's still, to me, like a reasonable enough measure of like the overall health of the economy, right? Like, it's not the only thing, right? It's like saying, like, is a forest healthy because you've counted the number of trees in it? Well, like, you don't necessarily know that a forest is healthy because it has like a certain number of trees, because there's a bunch of other stuff going on in there, right? That is essential for sustaining that ecosystem. But I do think it's valuable to see like the overall picture, because what ends up happening, okay, rents go up. What do people who are in that situation, whose rent is going up, do? Well, they consume less of something else, right? Like they have to, like, unless they're getting more money, and in some cases they have to, reallocate those funds to rent and away from going to bars or going on vacation or like whatever, right? So
Right.
like it's not like that rent going up, it's like, oh, we're just like counting this thing that shouldn't count. Like it still matters. So even if rent's going up, medical care is going up, etc., like the overall picture of like, is it still growing now? Because the
Right.
point that a lot of the lefties make is like growth, and this is like a degrowther mindset, like that growth in and of itself isn't a good thing, but like demonstrably, like when GDP is going up, people tend to be more prosperous, more healthy, happier, etc. It isn't everything, because like I think like what it ends up getting into is issues like inflation, which I know we're going to talk about, but like overall, like it is an okay measure of the economy, but shouldn't be taken in isolation as the only thing that matters.
All right. So while I agree with what you're saying in a factual sense, I want to say that the crowing about the metrics of GDP by the administration is it is in and of itself a negative externality. It is a problem creating situation where it is tone deaf to the actual like reality that people are experiencing. So if my rent goes up and I can't go to a bar, or I can't buy a plane ticket, or I can't buy gas for my car, or I can't buy formula for my baby, that's a problem. And
Yeah.
that is something that GDP pays no attention to. So when Nina Turner wants to lecture me on GDP, and she's actually not one of the ones lecturing, but when Joe Biden
She's on
wants
the
to,
opposite. She's like, Joe Biden is terrible, and
yeah,
like the economy is way worse than people expect. There's a bit of horseshoe theory going on here, where
let's
like
hear.
the far right and the far left are like, Joe Biden's terrible and this economy is the worst, and then people towards the center are like, I don't know, there's some pretty good things here. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So as the other thing that gets discounted that isn't really covered in the World Economic Forum thing is that devaluation of the currency would obviously contribute to a higher GDP. Okay, so when we see GDP or the stock market going up, we see rents going up, we see healthcare going up, we see food costs going up. This is a symptom of too much money being in circulation.
Right.
So those are things that contribute positively to GDP when in fact they create problems for the individual participating in the economy. Does that, I'm sure that makes sense to you, and I hope that makes sense to the people we're talking to out there tonight.
Right. I mean, I honestly thought you'd go harder after the government spending aspect of GDP, but
Well, I think that's something else that I would go after. But I know you probably have a really good counter to it, so I'm avoiding it. And I'm going to let you
No.
bring it up
I mean, well,
so
like
that I can respond to you. That's my game plan there.
No, it is a thing, right? Like that government spending gets counted in GDP, and like that's why, like again, like I don't look at like just GDP, right? I look at other stuff like what is the percent of income people are spending on things like housing and transportation, and housing is going up. This is part of why people are like stressed. You mentioned the rent thing, like government regulations have made it difficult to build, and in a lot of places like housing price increases and rent increases are accounting for like a major portion of the inflation that we're seeing, because like the cost of like just having a place to live has gone up, and that's stressing people out. And again, that doesn't get fully counted. Like the Biden administration, they're going to put their spin on things because they're politicians, and I expect politicians to do that, just like I expect corporations to make money. I expect politicians to say like, hey, look at this metric, we're doing good on this metric.
Yeah.
Okay, fair. And it's like our job, and I mean like our job as radio hosts, voters, etc., to say like, no, that's not the only thing we can look at, but we can look at other stuff too. Like we can look at like, are people like consuming other stuff like outside of rent in a way that's comparable to like what we were doing before 2020, and generally yes, we are doing that. And I want to bring up this one too. Shelley says unemployment is low because people have to work extra jobs to pay their bills. Inflation is off the charts, far worse than the 70s. It's not worse than the 70s. I mean, like it stinks. It's not great. It's not worse than the 70s yet. It can get there. Don't worry. There's time. But I want to bring up the people who have multiple jobs. It's actually at 5.1%, the people who have multiple jobs right now, which is about the same as it was in 2019, and it was a lot higher, going back like decades. It's kind of almost at a historic low. the 5.1% of people have multiple jobs. So like I get it that seems to make sense as a theory. Like, oh, people have to take multiple jobs now to make ends meet, but it's just not. It's not the reality, right? And that's kind of like the point of why people are frustrated with these statistics. It's like, okay, I can understand your point that these statistics are not the only things that matter. The stock market isn't the only thing that matters if you don't own that much stock, even though most Americans, the majority of Americans do own stocks. You know, if you have a retirement plan, you own stocks. Like, you know, the unemployment rate, it feels a bit abstract. Like the weird part to people is like, well, why doesn't your average person understand that like those aspects of the economy can be doing well and like maybe some other aspects aren't, right? Like why don't people have a nuanced enough understanding of like, you know, economic discussion, say, okay, GDP is good, but like we still have problems with people who are living in poverty in X areas and inflation and whatever. It's weird that they're wrong about stuff though. And like defiantly wrong. Like, no, I choose to believe that GDP is actually negative and that we're actually in a recession. Well, no, that's not true. It is weird that you say it's true. You can say it doesn't matter, which is what you're arguing. But a lot of other people are just saying it's not true, which is incorrect.
Okay, I'll take that on for a second because I think that what's important to people is their personal situation. So what they're seeing.
That's not for that.
Yeah, well, what they're seeing is that they're feeling squeezed. Even from that article about the statistical analysis, 65% of Democrats admit to feeling squeezed. I think paycheck to paycheck or some other metric that they're saying that it's hard to be excited about this economy when they're feeling a financial squeeze. And I think that metric right there is probably the one that's most important. If 65% of blue team participants are also feeling an economic pinch and perhaps suggesting that they're in they themselves are in a recession, that's a metric that should be somehow more broadly measured, like Carter's misery index. We should bring back the misery index.
There is a poll for this. There's a Gallup poll for this actually, and it's been going on for quite a while. And they ask, how would you rate your financial situation today? Excellent, good, only fair, or poor? And 46% of people said excellent or good. 36% said fair, and only 17% said their financial situation is poor. This is done Q1 of 2024, and that's like pretty average. It was a lot lower 2008 to 2012.
Yeah. Well, but let me just, it illustrates a problem, right? Where I would say my financial situation is good to excellent. But if you were to ask me if my financial situation appears to be improving, I would say no, I'm trading dollars with reality. And as I move towards retirement, that creates some stress for me. So I think that again, the way that these guys ask questions is a problem. But I get your point there.
And actually, to that point, and I shared the link to this, so y'all can go look at this. That did flip recently. In 2024, 47% of Americans felt that their financial situation was getting worse, and 43% said it was getting better.
Okay.
So
that was encapsulated in that study, and we're seeing basically what I said. Am I hearing you right?
Yeah. So you're seeing that, but it's interesting because again, a lot of people, it's weird because a lot of people say I'm actually doing pretty well, but I feel like it's going to get worse. Like they're just negative about the future, right? And then we're going to talk about that in the next segment because we're running out of time. But they feel like they're doing well, but it could get worse. Yeah. So are they feeling that way because the media or TikTok or whatever is poisoning their minds, or is there's something that like the pundits are understanding that we need to get to the bottom of? Like,
shrinkflation, bro.
That's what we're going to talk about. All right, so we have to head the break on WYSL. Thanks again for joining us here on The Free Solution. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon.
You brought the details, the deets, bro. The deets.
Sure
you brought the deets. That was good. That was good, man. Sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to get to that one too. No, I mean they polled like a bunch of like random voters. You can look at like the crosstabs on there. It's like just a random sampling of folks.
Yeah, they generally.
I've gotten a couple polls before. Not this one, but I've gotten a handful of like like congressional and like state Senate polls usually is what I get because I vote in all those elections.
Yeah, I got a couple of polls. I got in on a couple. One I felt was legitimate, and one I felt like was an advertising campaign for Hillary Clinton.
Oh,
And I was torturing the poor girl asking all the questions, and I'm like,
I think I've talked about like I got one that was definitely a Democratic push poll, and I was just like, no, you guys are clowns. No, let me explain to you why you're wrong.
I did too. Like every really horrible question, I took a few minutes to explain the girl that asked it. She's reading off of a piece of paper, and I'm like, that's a really horrible question because it actually implies the answer in the question, and that you're not going to get. You're going to get a reaction, like either a favorable reaction or a very, very unfavorable reaction. You're not getting a real answer. You're getting a reaction. She was like, would you mind if we just moved on to the next question then?
I can only write down like, strongly agree.
Yeah. So let's talk about Shelley's deal because that was something that perhaps we'll cover in more in depth in the next thing. But people on fixed incomes are definitely getting crushed. Okay. They raised Social Security something like 8%, but inflation cumulatively over the last 4 years is regardless of at least 21% cumulative by the best metrics offered by Bidenomics, okay? By Paul Krugman, by Robert Reich. Like that's a real dystopian miscommunication, and it's delicious.
Actually, so Tim, I think that's a really good point. And you know what I want to do? I want to actually go back to the show and we can discuss that point. Because I don't know, like I do see that, and I see some of the Democrats are like, yeah, but like inflation's only like 2.2% or 5%, but it's really 2% if you don't count housing. I'm like, yeah, but over the last like 2 years, how much is it?
Right. No, it matters, man. It matters. It matters huge, and they're glossing over a real issue, and it's going to cost them votes. I hope.
All right, let's go back. 3, 2. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Marion O'Connor.
I'm here, man. And look, WSL audience, we love you, but you're missing some passionate discussion. And look, check out our podcast on Spotify. Check it out join us in our live presentations. Kevin and I want to do more of this, and so we want more people joining us. So anyway, you missed some good stuff, but we have more good stuff. So let's go, Kevin. Let's roll.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'd kind of started talking in the break, and I cut you off. I'm like, no, save this for the WYSL audience. We're talking about like and one of our listeners had said that, like, personally, they're not having them enough money to pay their bills and properly feed themselves, but they're finding ways to make do. But like we had started talking about like how, inflation in the way that's affecting people who are on a fixed income isn't just like, oh, look at this number now. The rate is this percent, and look, we've solved it. Like, you feel good, peasants. We fixed the problem.
That's a good way to put it.
But because I saw that and I was like, that is so dismissive of like what people's situations are. Because if you are and I know in aggregate, they would respond, a lot of people's income grew over the last 4 years. And we're gonna talk about this too. But if your income did not grow over the last few years, inflation's hitting you hard, real hard.
It's changed your life. Yeah, it's a life-changing level of inflation that accumulates year after year. 3% one year, 3% the next year. That's more than 6% accumulated change in what you have to spend. Okay. What you're buying is now up 7, 8, 9%. We're higher than that. They're bragging about a cumulative total of something like 21% for X amount of basket of goods. But a basket of goods, as portrayed by the Bloomberg Association doing a poll, has no real reflection on someone's life. So when I say my basket of goods includes 25% food purchases in beef, and now I go into the store and beef is 40% higher than it was 3 years ago, that's a real impact. And if I was living on a fixed income, that could be devastating to my diet, right? So then devastate my rent, devastate my taxes, devastate the fact that everything I buy that has sales tax on it is now also more expensive. So devastate how much I'm paying in sales tax. Shrinkflation is also real. Like, I'm rolling a bunch of stuff in here because I want to throw spaghetti at the wall. But
tell us about Elizabeth Warren.
Yes, we need laws to protect us from shrinkflation. What we need is sound monetary policy, and that's going to actually hurt a little bit, right? Like, The transition to
kinda is.
sound monetary
Gonna hurt
policy,
GDP.
it's gonna crush the GDP. But like Mike Termott says, the government spending adds nothing of value. I love that line, man. It's stuck in my brain, man.
They
was
take our
awesome.
money and then they waste it. Yeah,
They
just
return
because it
nothing.
counts for a figure does not mean it's done something good or useful.
That's correct. He said it stronger though, and I loved it.
Yeah, he did. No, he very pithy. I
Yeah.
love it. So yeah, like some great points there. Like again, inflation is very much a real issue for folks, and I think the people who are dismissing it, like just they live in a different world, right? Again, you could say like, okay, a bunch of wages went up by 25%, and so like in aggregate, like okay, great, but like it didn't work that way for everybody, and there is something to this too. Like I think there's the people who are a little bit more empathetic and have tried to analyze the situation have said, okay, even the people whose wages have gone up kind of feel like inflation is killing them, right? Because like it is partially psychological. You could say like, hey, I earned that raise, right? Like I've been working towards this promotion for a long time. So the fact that I'm getting paid, $15,000 more this year is because I worked hard and that was going to happen no matter what. It wasn't because of some amorphous inflation that made, my boss want to pay me more. I earned that. Whereas inflation is something that's happening to someone, like it's happening externally. It's just happening to you. You're just walking to the grocery store one day and you're like, man, why did beef go up? Like, why is it that like when I fill up my cart, it's instead of like $150, it's $300 now, right? Like
that's another one, man. Those prices are all over the place. Like they were cheaper, they were more under control, and now that's taking a chunk out of your pay. It's tough out there, man.
Yeah, and so like that's partially why, like, even if like you feel like your personal situation is like sort of better because maybe you did get a promotion, maybe you did make more money, you switched jobs, whatever, you're still like, all right, I barely got ahead though because like everything else is more expensive now. Cool. Yeah. I made like 25% more money, and like 90% of that is now eaten away by like my grocery and electricity bill. Cool. Like,
yeah.
You're running on a treadmill. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and that's demoralizing. And
it is.
And I will say this. Go ahead.
Yeah, imagine being a railroad worker where you negotiate this great contract of 8% raises per year, and the first year inflation like strikes up at about 9.1%, and the president tells you that you can't strike because you're valuable. It's like I would have quit. Like I wouldn't have been able to do that. I would have been so freaking mad because I can do math, simple math, and I'll be like, I think we're just breaking even. We may actually be losing money, but no, I can't strike. And now my pay, I'm just trading dollars with the government at this point. It's ridiculous. So anyway, that was what I wanted.
I mean, like 100%.
Shout out to the railroad union.
That one's more on the nose than most others, right? Like it's really directly okay. Like how did I really gain anything here?
Nope.
And I do want to point out, like, because we talk about like inflation being caused in part by the government's spending and printing of money.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to be clear, this isn't just Joe Biden's fault. It is also very much Donald Trump's fault. And the inflation started under him. So if you're like, that's why we got to vote Trump. No, man, like it like the dude like increased the budget by just a ton. Spending trillions and trillions a year, adding to the debt. The inflation started under him.
He got rolled, Kevin. It's not his fault. It's Fauci. Fauci played him, Kevin. Fauci played him.
Started before 2020. Started before 2020. He was already a spendthrift beforehand. We had people like Steve Bannon be like, no, this is the time to spend because interest rates are low. So like we should just spend and get stuff done now. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Like
and then
there is a certain level of miscommunication based on your color affiliation that drives me insane. That modern monetary theory has been transcendent from president to president to president to president. Yeah. And Trump and Biden turned it up to 1 million. George W. Bush also turned it up to 1 million. You guys remember Too Big to Fail? That guy was a Republican. Okay. Like that's where that started. Okay. So like
started at him, continued under Obama, and then kind of like leveled out a little bit, and then Trump jacked things up again, and then Joe Biden's like, "Oh man, those are rookie numbers. Let's go bananas." And he did, like he just spent ridiculous amounts of money, like to basically do whatever he wanted, like pack whatever projects in he wanted. From the Inflation Reduction Act, hilarious.
It's
To
good stuff. These guys are great. They have a sense of humor. A lot of us don't get it. We just need to learn when to laugh. Like, that's all.
yeah. So it's all this stuff again. Like Joe Biden doesn't get any credit here. I'm just saying like that Donald Trump's not going to fix that either. And if he promises to fix that, he's lying. Like I'm sorry. Like we have a track record to run on here. He's not going to fix that. And I don't know what to do with that. But like, yeah, if you want to fix, and in fact, what Donald Trump's doing is he's proposing like 10% tariffs on everything. So,
Right.
what's that going to do? If you have a universal 10% tariffs and we import a bunch of food, what's that going to do to your grocery store prices? Well, guess what? Everything that's imported, which is a lot of stuff, and that's fine. Some stuff just doesn't grow well in the U.S. Like I'm fine with imported kiwis or whatever. Like,
yeah, avocados. Are we going to stop? If we stop importing avocados, I am going to freak out. Okay,
yeah,
and if avocados go up like more than than what they are, because I can handle what they are, like $1.25 an avocado. That's fine. But if all of a sudden they go to $2, that's going to have another major impact on my financial budgeting. Like, it's crazy. Don't do this to me.
Tim's budget is like 12% avocados.
It's something like that. I don't know. I do like avocados, and they're a superfood.
Yeah, no, and they're good stuff, right? Like, and again, and some people, just go without avocados. No, like I want to be able to do these things. Like, I should be able to like eat the food that I want to eat, and it should be relatively cheap. And Trump adding a 10% tax on everything that comes in, it's not just food too, it's going to be everything. So anything manufactured overseas, like, it doesn't necessarily mean manufacturing is going to come back here. It just means our stuff's going to get more expensive, and that instead of that money being in your pocket, it's going to be in the hands of the government. Cool.
Which
like, how is that winning?
Well, they'll pay down the debt with it, Kevin. And
they will not, Tim. They absolutely will not. Like, I could at least get an argument for that. Like, oh, we got to get serious and tighten the belt and like pay down the debt. No, that's not what they're gonna do.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not what they're gonna do. Do you want to circle back around to a couple of other economic metrics that I find problematic with, since we were talking about the GDP and we kind of dissected that? And actually, you and I were a little closer than I thought we were going to be. Like, I can understand where it is an important metric, but that it's kind of too much of an aggregate, and how that can blow apart a study. But we have other metrics that look awful. Okay, the savings rate is at best flat, probably declining. The total aggregate savings is dropping. Consumption on credit cards and buy now pay later schemes it looks like the Amazon stock chart. It may be leveling off right now, but it hit a growth rate in 2023 that was astronomical. People are now burdening themselves with high priced debt. It looks like just to pay their bills and buy their food. So
it's not just buying their food though, because it is like being spent on consumer goods, like maybe irresponsibly, but like, consumer goods, I mean like TVs and video game systems and like whatever, right? Like stuff like, so like, because a lot of these same Democrats I talked about earlier, they're like, hey, look at like consumer spending levels. They're going up, but like the ways in which they're going up might be unsustainable, because they're using the buy now pay later type of stuff. They're putting it on credit cards, like they're saving a little bit less. I mean, like, hooray for Keynesianism, but like there's a possibility that might not work out in the long term.
Whoa, you just said hooray for Keynesianism? Are you messing with me?
That was sarcasm. Deep sarcasm. Because that is the Keynesian like model, right? Like,
is.
It doesn't matter if you go into a little bit of debt, like on the consumer level, even like, go spend it, because that's what keeps the economy going. That's what keeps the GDP high. That's what keeps people employed. Like, keep going. It doesn't, like, we'll worry about the debt stuff later.
There's an argument to be made under the Keynesian model that incredibly responsible investment in public infrastructure is a great way to smooth out the business cycle. That's not what we have. Like, it's nothing like that. It's like, it is a society sustaining issue if done incredibly responsibly. But the brakes are off with $34 trillion in debt, man. Like, I think John Maynard Keynes would be embarrassed by what we're doing. Like, and he was.
I mean, like the Keynesian model was in theory supposed to be like, okay, so we when we're in a recession, when the economy's in trouble, you spend a bit of money, and when the economy's doing great, you slow it down a little bit, raise taxes, pay off the debts. Like that was sort of the model, right? Like,
Right.
which is, there's some flaws of that too, like if you look at like Austrian economists and their critiques of that, but like that was the idea, right? And now we're just like, oh, the economy's doing great, cool, we're going to triple spending anyway. Hey, wait, what? No, now's the time where you pump the brakes a little bit. The economy's doing fine, the employment rate's lowest it's ever been, the GDP is good. Maybe don't spend so much, like just take it down a notch.
There's things that I wish I had at my fingertips, but there was a cute little discussion that the pyramids were built because of Keynesian economics, where like to kind of keep society civilized and to kind of bring people together. They're like, hey, we'll give them booze and food and salt and have them haul blocks around all day. And that will maintain our societal structure. We're building infrastructure. And they use allegedly the same argument was like they were not originally tombs for pharaohs. They were community centers or perhaps energy generators. I'm not exactly sure. It gets a little wild there. I love it. I love it. I love it.
I wish the aliens were still around to tell us what was the point.
Oh, they're still around, but even they don't like Keynesian economics the way we're doing. They're just like, we can't talk to these guys, so they calm the F down.
All right. Well, so we talked about. So I actually want to talk about savings rate stuff, and we're running out of time for this segment. I want to talk savings rate. What you spend on goods and services, because I want to talk about that Nina Turner tweet and what she says and a bunch of other folks say it costs to live in New York State. So WYSL audience, stay tuned. I will tell you how much money you need to live comfortably in New York State. Maybe. I mean, if you believe some leftists on the internet.
Yeah.
So. All right, we'll be back here on A Free Solution in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon. But
that Siena College poll, I'm kind of reading it right now. I missed some of it. It's actually pretty good.
Some interesting things in there.
Yeah.
And I did want to bring up this thing too. From Shelley, this is going back a little bit, but television light bulbs no longer manufactured in the United States. We've regulated most manufacturing facilities out of business.
We have.
Yeah, sort of. We actually, like, by output, the U.S. is still like the number 2, most productive manufacturing country in the world after China.
Because we do a lot of custom manufacturing, and we do a lot of interesting style stuff where we get to kind of do time and materials, and we build planes and we build war equipment. These are highly specialized, highly technical things that we get to kind of charge a lot of money for, and because it's not a competitive market. So yes, I agree that our manufacturing on that level is still interesting and provides interesting support to the economy. But there is something to what we're saying. We're not competing with making light bulbs, which I'm not sure that we could. I'm not sure that we should.
Like, man, look, if they want to make like light bulbs for like a quarter cent over in China and then sell them to us for like $2 instead of like, inflation adjusted equivalent of like $15 a few decades ago. Great, man. We win by that. Like that's fine.
We do.
Same with televisions, right? Like I remember my parents bought like a 55-inch television that was like $3,000. Like, they spend a ridiculous amount of money on it. I can buy one of those at Walmart for like $300 now.
I had a 42-inch television, and I paid $1,500 for it. And my Tiny Tim athlete, like 3 years old, was sick and home with me. So I stayed home from work. I had the guys go out. He wants to play frisbee, fever-induced frisbee, and like he wanted. I could tell he was going to throw it into the TV, but for some reason he was insistent on throwing it from the direction which would only allow. I tried to get him to throw it from the other direction, but he wanted to throw it with his right hand. He wanted to be facing the window. So out of his right hand into my $1,600 Panasonic TV that was 42 inches at the time.
Yeah,
but
big deal at the time.
It was huge. I mean, it was a huge deal. And he wrecked it.
Man.
For a while, it had like a section where it just was like lines down it, and then the rest of the screen was good. And then some days it would work perfectly, and then some days it wouldn't work. And I hung on to it for months. But finally, I just had to throw it away. And then I realized My next TV that was slightly bigger was only $700. So I was like, all right, win-win.
Yeah, right. I mean,
Making
now,
win-win.
like, yeah, I mean, TVs are crazy cheap right now. I think I have a TV that we bought. It was before. It's at least, gosh, I think we bought it on like Gregory Street. So like, it's almost like 15 years old now.
Yeah.
No, but how long have I lived? 12 years old. And it's like a 36-inch TV that we bought for like $150 at the time. And eventually my toddler is also going to destroy my TV. Like I can feel it coming. Like
it's going to be
gonna
less
happen.
of a blow to you, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but exactly. And it'll be less of a
was-
blow. And I can be like, shucks, I can get rid of my 36-inch TV and buy a 55-inch TV for like less than like what I got this one for.
This was a $1,500 TV in, I think, $2,007.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's
Big
like
deal.
be like $8,000 now. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
right.
exaggerating, but it would be, you know, on the order of $2,900 now if the prices had remained consistent. At some point, I will make the optimistic argument that there's other ways out of this current monetary fiasco that we have going on, and that is rapid advancement of technologically improved manufacturing could, in fact, if we allow the government to steal all of the benefits from it, help balance out this wild devaluation and this incredible economic burden that we have placed on the future. If we allow them to capture most of it, and they will anyway. So
they'll certainly try.
Yeah. The gods of scarcity are very successful, man, at arguing their way into positions of power and stealing from us all.
Yeah. All right. So we'll go back in a minute. And we'll talk about that Nina Turner tweet. And you know, she was the only one. I saw a bunch of conservative folks share the same thing, which is interesting.
I like her takes on Palestine. I like her advocacy there. I don't think that's having just unmuted her for a day or two. I am not blanket approval of
Tim's gonna go full tanky by like the end of the year. Like
Tommy,
he's praising like degrowthers today, World Economic Forum, talked about Elizabeth Warren.
I just because I thought that would be the best resource for you and I for me to counter factual the GDP.
Yeah, someone saved him.
World Economic Forum.
He's going full lefty. He's gonna be a Bernie bro soon.
Yeah, no, I was a real leftist when I was younger, man. I was like there, and then radically more conservative, but for reasons because I could see where the government was screwing poor people more than the economy was screwing poor people. Like I come from being poor, dude. It's real. Yeah. Like it was a real economic scarcity that I grew up with. I see that my life now is less economically scarce than it was when I was younger, and the reasons are I followed some good ideas to the best of my ability, and that the government has interfered with some of my best ideas over and over again. So, you know, like that's real, man. I came from there, that scarcity mindset, and I'm still there.
No, right. And that's important. And you brought up something I don't want to fully like flesh out now, but it's interesting, like that there's a lot of people on the left and a lot of people on the right who don't acknowledge what you just acknowledged, which is like you had plans to try to like advance yourself out of that situation, right?
Sure.
And there's a bunch of people on the left and right who are like, there's nothing you could do. We're powerless. Like we've just got to like just donate to this campaign and like they will fix everything. Instead of like taking agency in your own life. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's like interfering with your ability to be able to like succeed, but not 100%. Like it's still worth trying. There's a bunch of people who I think they're legitimately getting like depressed when they're like, there's nothing I can do. The capitalists are keeping me down and I'll never advance. So why bother trying?
Yeah.
And they get depressed about it.
Right. And then
the same thing happens. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was to say the same thing happens to like libertarians too. Like, oh man, like I will never be able to start a business because the government makes it so difficult to start a business. Like, well, yeah, it's difficult. It stinks. It's really rough, but like people still do it. Like you should, if you want to do it, you should try and don't like let the government like being terrible, like be an excuse for you not to advance your dreams. You should still try.
Yeah, you should try. And yeah, that's real. Not accepting the battlefield that the government offers you is very important. And look, you know, we're here for that. I can help people with that. Like there's ways around it.
Well, let's fight to change the conditions, but like you don't need to give up the field completely. You know, don't just like accept defeat. Anyway, that's our motivational talk for the day. Let's
I feel so optimistic right now. I'm
Yeah, right?
upbeat.
Oh, we'll change that, I'm sure. All right, let's go back in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson here today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
And once again, my friends out there in the WSL audience, Kevin's friends out there in the WSL audience, we'd love to have you join us for some of our conversations that happen off air. But we're glad you're joining us on the radio. We appreciate the space that we've been given on the radio. Thank you all for joining us. Kevin, where are we going now?
So we're going to talk about cost of living, and I want to do it by sharing. I'll just share my screen real quick with
that's a good one.
Disney
Yeah.
Turner. Income a family needs to live comfortably in the U.S. She says medium household income in America is $69,000, and then shows this, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's all these figures. It's saying that to live comfortably in the state of Georgia, it takes $213,000 a year. Comfortably in New York, $279,000 a year.
Yeah.
Tim, what do you think? Like, is that what it takes to live comfortably in New York State? Do you need $279,000 a year?
I mean, are you offering me $279,000? Because
I do not have it.
The answer would be, first of all, that this is like gobbledygook economic statistics that I think they went to the 50-30-30 rule or something like that. That does not quite fit. Again, we talk about macro presentation of statistics that does not fit individuals' reality. So I don't know where they pull these numbers out of, but like
I looked it up.
Cool.
So you're absolutely right. Like they did use like the 50-30-20 thing. So they first of all, they assumed that this is for a family of 4, 2 parents and 2 children. The 2 children in this case are in full-time childcare, which, oh boy, childcare is expensive.
Wildly, yeah, it's
man. Like I'm gonna be spending like a ton of money. Like it's gonna be like
$30K.
Yeah, it's gonna be like over $30K a year for childcare. And so that's, first of all, it's making that assumption. Second of all, it's basically they took a number from basically this. I have the Rochester, New York one pulled up, but the MIT living wage calculator. Okay. And they said, okay, 2 adults with both working with 2 children, what does it take to live in New York State? They took the whole New York State one, which is the whole state for all of them, which is kind of skewed a bit by some expensive metros, right? Like it is not the same cost of living in New York City as it is in Oneonta, New York. Just not even close. So it's a little bit, it's a little bit skewed by that. And you can see, like, so for me, my situation, Rochester, New York, this calculator says it should be $120,000 and some change, right? But that's, again, assuming 2 kids and full-time childcare. Plus they're a bit generous with some of their basic needs, right? So this is supposed to be for basic needs, but they're like, oh yeah, like it also includes like entertainment stuff, like going out to theme parks and buying books and like et cetera, right? They call it like a civic engagement. Basically, the money to go out and do the fun stuff. And so that coming back to this company, which is a Smart Asset, which is a company that's trying to get your money so they can make more money for you, right? So just it's a bit biased. It's not necessarily wrong, but it's a bit biased. They took that and they said, okay, basic needs are that amount, right? Like so, like $140,000 for New York across the entire state. And that's only 50%. So we need 30% more for discretionary spending, which is actually already included in the living wage calculator, and then 20% for savings, which is not even close to what like most people are saving.
It'd be nice. 20%.
Yeah, it may be great.
Yeah,
like that's a good ideal. Like, so, because we kind of talked about that earlier, the savings rate is pretty low. It's something like 3.5% for like the average American, right? Like it's not that high. It's not great. People should be saving more. That's fair.
We should be saving more, and we already hashed out the reasons why we're not. This is the government's fault. They're sticking it to us and they're lying. Sorry, it's the last segment, Kevin. I got to do some ranting.
Yeah, no, of course you got to put that in.
Yeah.
So, to me, like this statistics a bit, these numbers are a bit misleading. It's like I don't think that everyone in New York needs to make $279,000 to live comfortably here. And then even in most states, you don't need to make that level of income to really live fully comfortably. But I do want to talk about like what does it actually take to live, right? Like I think that's fair. And a couple comments here. So many states have numbers close to both Alaska, where it's cheaper, and Hawaii, where it's much more expensive. Makes all the numbers suspect, in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, again, to me, it's a bit. I know a lot of people who don't make anywhere close to that amount, and they say they live like pretty comfortably and happily, and like.
Here, let me put up Patty's. Like her mission, right, is to have a hobbit house at $280,000 a year, or I think it was 10 for a single person. You would kill it in a hobbit house in upstate New York, and you would literally be driving a Porsche if you wanted to. You'd be driving a Tesla. Yeah. You could get the Tesla truck if you wanted to. Like that would be a wild amount of money,
Yeah, no, it would be, right. Like, yeah, you get nice like Earthship going, and like you keep your expenses low. Like, yeah, like. But to me, again, like you don't necessarily need that amount of money to live comfortably. They make us some pretty generous assumptions about like how much money you need for discretionary stuff and for savings, which again, that's great. That's ideal. But like most people can still save effectively for retirement without doing that. Plus a lot of your compensation, to keep in mind, is not necessarily in like direct income too. Like it's also like some of it's getting pulled out into retirement for a lot of people. Some of it's getting pulled into healthcare, et cetera, like other types of benefits. I'll pull up this one too. Dark Clouds in Mine YouTube says, making 100K a year is not an anomaly these days. My kids make nearly 70K a year, so needing a 200K to be comfortable is completely doable for a 2-income household. Yep, sure. Like it's not, especially with inflation, salaries are going up. Like it's not all that like crazy. But again, I still know people who make a lot less than that and are like, they would probably put themselves, if they were polled, like in the fair situation, like, yeah, I'm doing all right.
Correct.
Genuinely, like they feel like they're doing all right. Maybe they're not saving as much for retirement as they should be, but again, I want you to keep in mind that when people share things like this, Nina Turner has her own motivations, and so is the company that made this graphic. The company that makes this graphic is trying to get you to like give up your money to that company so they can make investments and make you more money, right? They're trying to make you feel economically insecure, like you're not keeping up with what you need to be successful. So, and that might be, the number might be accurate, but like when I see that type of stuff, I'm like, they're trying to sell me something. So like, I'm gonna be a bit standoffish about it, right?
Sure. And let me ask you this, Kevin, why is Nina Turner like lecturing on it?
And that's the next one, right? So why is she doing that? What her motivation is that she wants to say that the economy is doing incredibly bad, that we're not distributing income equitably enough, and the rich have enough money to get by in all these states, but your average person, most of the people reading those tweets are like, wow, I don't make anywhere near that. I must be suffering. And it's because the capitalist economy has made things difficult for me, right? And if you look at the comments, like the ones that aren't skeptical of her in that chart, that's exactly what they say. They say stuff like that, like, wow, capitalism has really made it difficult to live here.
Right. Look, that actually brings me back all the way around to our original conversation. It's something that we glossed over. Minimum wage laws contribute to inflation almost as much as, well, maybe I'm overstating it, but minimum wage laws contribute to like this dystopian issue of prices increasing without value being added. And I think Nina's one of those people that thinks we can just make more laws to make people more comfortable, and we can hand out money on top of that. And all of those things actually devalue the average human being's time. And I'm uncomfortable with her communist take on that.
It does. And the thing to keep in mind about minimum wage is you have a couple effects that can happen from it. One is that, okay, you've raised the wages to that floor, and prices are going to have to necessarily go up for that. Like they're seeing that in the in California, where they've raised the fast food minimum wage to any restaurant who isn't buddies with Gavin Newsom. Like, yeah, they're seeing prices go up. That's what it is. The minimum wage for DoorDash drivers in places like Seattle, minimum wage go up. Okay, this company's not just going to take the loss. They're just, okay, we'll have to make it up somehow. We'll add a fee. People don't like that. So you'll either pay more, or it'll become more profitable for companies to say, instead of hiring a worker in this place, we're going to have to pay them $30 an hour. They could put an iPad there, or like some other type of computer, or like a weird, I don't know if you've seen this trend, but like they will actually outsource to like India, like customer orders at fast food restaurants. It's wild. Like you're on a video call with someone overseas, so they make sure they can understand the order and punch it in correctly. So
I've seen some. Yeah, I've seen some wild ways of ordering food and having it delivered to you. Where, like, I went to this noodle place in Long Island, and they were like, "We don't have people to take your order. You need to figure out our system, and you will open the locker door when your food is done. That's how it goes." I'm like, and luckily they had a guy that walked around explaining it to people, because, like, obviously I'm practically a boomer, and I'm just like, I will walk right out of this place and not eat any noodles from here ever. And the dude was like, "Here, let me help you with this. We'll get it all set up. You'll get a text. It's really not that big a deal. We don't steal your information. I promise." I didn't believe him, but whatever, I got my noodles eventually, so it was forcing me into that situation did almost cause me to go to the pizza place next door, which was on Long Island, also overpriced because it was in the Great Plaza, space costs money. So like it's real. Like there are innovations that will take the human element right out of it. Like a computer does not cost $17 an hour. It will literally sit there forever, run for weeks at a time without a problem, and also costs is electricity. That's it, and maintenance, but it costs nothing.
Relatively speaking, is lower. So
and its attitude doesn't suck.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it won't clean anything, and it won't go restock shelves when it's not busy.
Yeah,
but neither will the average Walmart cashier.
Why not? But I mean, I remember working in fast food, and they would like at both McDonald's and Auntie Anne's, they would be like, "Okay, time to lean, time to clean."
Yeah, well, that's a successful business has that motto. Even jobs that I run it still thinking that and explaining that to the guys. Like, hey, like, look, we're waiting for a shipment. Let's get organized. Let's go clean. Let's get the tools organized. Let's make sure the batteries are charged. Like it's an efficiency thing, and it actually kind of keeps everybody a little bit more engaged, even though you hate the guy that's telling you to clean.
Yeah, right. Like, man,
but I don't care. You can hate me, you little.
Sit here and twiddle my thumbs, and like the boss is coming in and telling me I have to go like work more. Like, man,
what a jerk!
Counters are clean enough. Whatever.
I just wiped the stupid counters. Like, come on, man.
Wipe them again.
Yes, right.
Probably needs it.
Go work. Pick the gum off the underneath of the table. That was something I used to do when I ran a restaurant. You're like, well, there's probably gum underneath the table. Go fix that.
Yep. Go check that out. Oh, the floors haven't been mopped in an hour and a half. Go clean the floors. Okay.
Passing the trauma inflicted upon me onto new people that got hired after me. It was beautiful. It's a very successful business model. Kevin, I feel
we got like a little less than 2 minutes left. What last points do you want to make for the WISL audience?
A while back, Kevin, and this is important. A while back, we talked about a guy who had his out in your area, Western New York, had his 750-pound pet alligator seized. This guy is not resting on his laurels. He is going after getting his pet back, and he's freaked out. Tony Cavallero is mad. Like, literally, they swatted him, Kevin. They came in armed and full body armor, assault shotguns. And guys, this came from our eye in the sky, our boots on the ground. Our friend Patty gave this to me, and she wanted to hear it on the radio. So here it is. This guy, Tony, is standing up for his rights. He's standing up for his pet, and he's going back to get Allie, the alligator, back from the DEC. Yeah, DC. Yeah. It gets a little confusing because he's like, they treated me like they were the DEA and they were going to shoot me and blah blah blah. So I got a little confused there for a second. But he's getting his alligator back from the DC, and he's suing him. And he thinks, if you send him a couple bucks, it might just help him out. I guess.
Good for him, man. Message. Like, that you know, it was a little bit shady where like he had this pet alligator. He was taking care of the alligator just fine. There wasn't allegations of like abuse or mistreatment.
They had a
The
pool,
allegation
man.
was basically like, you know, he was letting other people like engage with the alligator, and therefore he was like participating. I forget what it was like, participating like a zoo-like activity that he wasn't authorized for.
Oh my God, that's
That's
wild.
what it was.
Like the government's wild. Wild.
No, that type of stuff is crazy. All right. Thank you for ending on a light note, Tim. So WYSL audience, we'll probably keep going, but thanks again for listening tonight. Appreciate you being here. Have a great night, folks. Take care. All right.
All right. Patty gave me a bunch of great ones. And I found one on my own. I wasn't sure if we could do it on the radio anyway, so it's perfect. Dude, every guy in the country, every guy in the world, and dogs, male dogs as well, have you know where I'm going.
I know where you're going with this.
Have microplastics in their testicles. But there is a solution.
Great.
Yeah, well,
What do we do, Tim?
all right. This guy from New York City got caught with 3 Burmese pythons in his pants when he flew into Florida. I am assuming that he saw this as a treatment for the microplastics in his testes, but he's literally going to go to jail for a year and get fined $5,000 if he doesn't resolve the situation. I'm not sure if the 2 stories are related, but in my brain,
a snake in your
they
pants?
are.
Yes, quite literally.
Yes, quite literally, and I'm using it as a treatment for my microplastic testes. I don't know. It all came together when I was kind of doing the.
Seems
the
like
show
it. They might be related. You know, you never know.
He's just out ahead of it, brother. That's what I'm seeing. You know.
You know, innovators and pioneers need to go and like test this stuff out, so we know. Like this is the man on the cutting edge of science.
It is, man. It is. That's how solutions get crafted, Kevin. So look, one thing I forgot to mention. In July of 2022, first quarter and second quarter of GDP numbers actually shrunk. And we were lectured by the Biden, administration that was not actually a recession. So if shrinking GDP can not actually be a recession, the inverse can also be true, and that growing GDP could possibly signal a recession. Not signal a recession, but there could still be a recession with growing GDP. That's how I see it.
Bidenomics got us all screwed up. I do remember that where people like, nah, but like it's only like a little bit of shrinkage. It doesn't count. I'm like, that's technically
we're gonna start dropping bombs overseas. Don't worry about it. It's gonna be huge.
Yeah, we gotta pump those numbers up, government spending up. We'll get that GDP in the black.
Yeah.
No, but that is a thing that happened. That's accurate. And actually like in 2022, we're still spending just a boatload of money. Like,
yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit like 2020 to 2024 is a bit weird. Well, 2020 to like specifically 2023 were a bit weird because we had 2020 where everyone got locked down, right?
Right.
Which, yeah. But a lot of people just lost their jobs. They couldn't go to work, etc. And then, we went through 2020 and then Biden won the election and then it yo-yoed back in the other direction. Like, and he was like, oh, look, greatest economic growth ever. Everyone just kind of went back to work, man.
That's so weird, man.
Like, oh, look at the employment rate and look at the, economic growth. And like, I've seen those charts where like, look at the economic growth of Biden compared to Trump and George Bush and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, yeah, you don't really get credit for that, man. Like, sorry, it wasn't Trump who caused, it wasn't really Trump who caused everyone to stay home. There's a bunch of businesses who made their own decisions, states who made their decisions. Like, it's just not all on him. And you don't get credit for everyone going back to work because you would have done the same exact thing.
He would have been probably worse than Trump. Like, Trump kind of let it happen, and he was supposedly this big freedom advocate.
Yeah.
And like, that was a problem. That was a game changer. And look, some of it feels like a psyop that they ran on the entire world just to get rid of Trump, but that seems weird. But I can't help but think it.
Tinfoil hat stuff, man.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It does feel like tinfoil stuff, but then, I mean, I'll admit it. Like, I can't help but going back to the fact that the government response to COVID was absolutely bizarre, absolutely authoritarian, and absolutely driven by an emotional threat that was not evidenced, especially for people my age and younger. It was not. I understood preaching caution. I understood preaching respect for elderly people, but I did not understand the prescriptions and the mandates handed out by the government. I didn't understand
Right.
them. They freaked me the f out and solidified me as a libertarian. To be perfectly honest with you, like I was like, oh, it's like, hey, Trump's pretty funny, you know. This is like I'm a populist, sort of. Like I hate the media too. You know what I'm saying? Like it was all there.
Yeah. Actually, so I'll let you indulge your conspiracy theorist mind for a little
Thank
bit.
you.
There's a great Fifth Column podcast. And I felt it like it's like Matt Welch from Reason and Michael Moynihan and
I love
uh,
those guys.
yeah, and Camille Foster. So they're really interesting. So they had a guy named Jacob Siegel on, and he talked about basically like how the deep state like did conspire in ways to try to shut down Trump. And it was an interesting discussion. He made one of the more coherent arguments for that.
Yep. Sure.
So
I'm not saying my arguments are coherent.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
yeah, no. Oh,
Yeah.
like there's a bunch of people who are like they'll talk about the deep state taking out Trump, and it's like a bunch of nonsense. Like, sorry, like some of you guys, I'm like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Like he made one where it's like, okay, look, like here are all these people who are here for a long term, and here are the specific ways in which they put pressure on other politicians to try to like undermine Trump's credibility in ways that were more nefarious than normal. And it's something that like, okay, so like interesting. There's enough plausibility there where I'm like, I at least understand the argument that he's making. It doesn't require me to take as many logical leaps.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and then specifically,
I get it.
yeah.
A more well-reasoned argument than I present to you.
I'm not attacking you specifically, but like, you know, like I've had some other folks who like back when I was doing live radio, like I had people after the election who were like sending me these like weird, badly photoshopped like pictures of like, you know, people like stuffing ballots, and I'm like, guys, that ain't it.
That ain't real. That
No, like
look,
that is obviously fake. Please stop.
so the
Yeah.
weirdest part about it is that the GOP still ignores the legal the stuff that they did that was absolutely legal to counteract the GOP's effectiveness. Like they did stuff that made ballot harvesting effective and legal, right? They did stuff that tied electoral representatives to I don't know. I can't even remember it all. It was so wild the things that they did, but the GOP has no counter to it. So they want people to be upset and give them money, but they haven't solved any of it. They haven't fought any of it on a grassroots ground level. Like they haven't done any of that. They haven't challenged it in court. They haven't like.
I mean, they've tried to challenge a bunch of stuff in court. They just failed. You know, they lost a bunch of stuff, and a lot of times with Republican judges too. They're just like, nah, there's not really anything here. Sorry, like do better.
Yeah, do better. Make your own laws. Also, look, mail-in voting, guys. That's something where the Republicans kind of lost the narrative. It's like, show up and vote. Don't mail in your ballot. It's like,
I mean, they opposed it at the time. It's just
Kevin. I know kids at work.
Everyone made the exception.
I know kids, and including myself. Like, I'm not going to miss a day of work so I can stay home and vote. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not doing that. And I know kids that travel all over the country because that's where real money is, machine operating, things like that, that don't vote, that would likely vote Republican if like it was encouraged for them to vote. But the Republicans cut off off their own nose in spite of their face. Like,
right. They're like, oh, you can't trust mail-in voting. Like, man, some of these folks would vote for you, you know, like seniors who can't get out of the house, people who are like businessmen traveling, you know, like mechanics traveling, things like that, you know, like, they might vote Republican, and you're like, nah, it's not real. Don't trust it. Don't do it. And a lot of people, like, it looks like it actually affected like the Republicans in 2020 in states like Georgia, where they put so much distrust in the system that a lot of people just stayed home.
Yeah.
And I've talked to people in real life who said that, like, man, like, what's the point of voting? Like, I'm just gonna stay home. And I'm like, but like the system's rigged, so like, and that's why like they won anyway. I'm like, you gotta. Sorry, man. Like, but like, if 1,000 more people who thought like you showed up, like the Republican would have won in this district. Instead, you just like sat on your hands and complained how the system's rigged against you instead of doing something about it. Like, unreal.
Yeah, no, it's a weird mindset. Like the conservative mindset is that they don't want things to change. What you really don't want is the government to run roughshod over your life. At least that's what you actually say. So when you take certain steps that allows the government to run roughshod over your life and not step into modern times and do battle in the modern playing field, you're missing the point, and you're being outflanked. So to think of it in war terms, you already lost the battle. You guys got to catch up. Like Vivek Ramaswamy did a nice job of presenting to the RNC that they in fact had a failing strategy, right? Like I was okay with what he said. It was very exciting too when he did it in that debate. He's like, does Ronna want to come up here and apologize to the RNC for losing blah 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 the potential red wave? It was political theater at its finest, Kevin.
Vivek is a good showman. Curious to see
really
what he's going to do at the Libertarian National Convention this weekend.
He's going to hang out, let people take selfies with him. Honestly, just for the selfie opportunity, I wish that I was going. But also, I've been traveling a lot, and I just don't care.
Go down to D.C., do your duty to elect the leaders of the Libertarian Party, the presidential candidate. Could have been a delegate, Tim. Could try. I
could have. I probably could have. I am not going to say the things that I want to say about the LPNY. I love the people that are putting in effort. I don't think the effort is wisely directed. I think that I could have had a bigger impact because they don't understand outreach the way that I understand outreach. I grew up building crowds and people to come visit me in bars so that I made a few extra dollars a night. Like outreach is absolutely key to success. And to do outreach, you got to be cool to people and you got to interact with the people that are cool back to you. Like that's real. And so I've gotten one very complimentary invitation from the existing Libertarian committee, the LPNY committee, and I've maintained friendships with other members of the Libertarian Party committee in New York State. But the invitations are key to future success. Now, you invite people all of the time, and that's the key to success. That's it. You just keep inviting people. People are going to say no. Don't get discouraged. Invite them to the next thing. Have fun. Like that's where I think
part of it too.
It is, man. Like you and I have fun doing our radio show. You and I, you're calmer, more rational, more grounded than I am. I love that. That's what makes this show real for me. All right. I'm trying to persuade you to be a crazy conspiracy theorist like myself.
Which man, that makes it fun, man. Like this is what, because you you're in touch with the stuff that I don't like because I don't pay attention to sometimes. You bring and occasionally you'll bring me stuff. I'm like, oh shoot, like that.
Yeah, and I can tell like I make you think sometimes, and you make me think, right? And I just love that. And it's an important part of human dialogue. It's an important part of civil discourse. I mean, how you feeling about time? Like
you got one more thing?
I've got one more thing that I want to share. It's a relatively long tweet from someone in what I believe, if I remember correctly, it's either Washington State or Oregon, and it's from Twitter. And you're going to love it because it covers issues about marijuana legalization that you and I predicted the failures of marijuana legalization. We were right then. We are right now. Why wouldn't people listen to the common sense take on what they wanted? So anyways, let me go. This Sonia Agora is a relatively popular, slightly more popular than I am on Twitter. She has a take on marijuana legalization that I think you're going to appreciate. And I found it. And when I retweeted it and I thought of our conversation. So marijuana legalization was a mistake. And she warns about a long post. And this is kind of a long post. So bear with me. I've known many small family weed farmers for over a decade. that's something that's real in upstate New York. There were people growing marijuana and selling it under USDA guidelines, under federal guidelines, and was completely legal. She would visit them. The whole town would know I was there. They kept tight tabs on their community and protected their own. The economy was thriving from the financial input these families would give, and the riffraff was kept out. Local communities protecting their own, investing in production. They minded their own business, stuck to their local community issues, and utilized the medical marijuana loopholes that would allow them to sell in a mostly gray market where everyone assumed personal responsibility for how they conduct themselves. Sometimes there were federal raids, and the community would rally to support them and build them back up again. The local police would usually turn a blind eye. They benefited from the peace as well until the feds would interfere and make a mess of things. I've seen these same family farms be absolutely decimated by legalization, which should be referred to as corporatization or cartelization in the last 5+ years here in Oregon. See, I knew we'd get to it. It's in Oregon. The regulations that got handed down, she's referring to the legalization regulations that got handed down, made more regulatory authorities and more hands in the pockets for an industry that operated in the gray zone just fine before. People who got licensed by the Oregon Department of Liquor and Cannabis had to use government wholesalers, have massive infrastructure to keep multiple backup power systems to make sure their plants were always under camera view, and accept government agencies to assess their operations at any moment. Now, anyone could purchase weed without threat or fines or criminalization. Yay. However, this comes with the burden that only some can actually sell now, and it comes with tax and extreme prejudice if you dare sell your product without the multiple government agencies. And that's point out one that I talked about. They turned it into a tax evasion situation, which dealing and participating in the black market prior to this had nothing to do with taxes. You'd get a little fine. You'd be like, all right, you got too much weed on you. Here's a couple $100. Like, it's not that big a deal. Tax evasion is a big freaking deal. All right. Yeah. So now all the family generational weed farmers have been run out of business. The little hippie towns of Oregon are but a ghost of what they were economically. And in the void of these family farms came the cartel. We have cartels making camp in southern and eastern Oregon, happy to fill the void that small farmers have made, happy to engage in the black market and exploit it without incentive to reinvest in their local communities like the farms before them. You have people crying out about the cartel issue without recognizing that the legalization and how the government went about it is the cause and effect of the issues around cartels and crime issues within the black market in Oregon communities. I thought this was so well written that I had to share it with our audience and specifically you, right? You do not need to ask the government for permission. Asking for permission to sell anything is always the wrong answer. Well, like, sure, you don't have to, but if you don't, like, now they'll get you for tax evasion. And that's
then they could come after you with guns and throw you in a cage.
Yeah, it's just like the black market, gray market is your friend. Use it wisely and take personal. All right, I'm not advocating her advice, but also I am. It's literally, she puts her finger on the pulse of the problem that you and I talked about in New York State that's happening in all of the states that decided to participate in legalization of cannabis.
Yeah.
And look, it's illegal because of racism and pulp wood paper. Like that's it. That's why it's illegal. Racism and pulp wood paper. Like, it's bullshit. It's fucking bullshit.
Yeah. And we could undo it. And it's like, okay, cool. New York's gonna legalize. Like, oh, but we're gonna add so many layers of bureaucracy onto this, so many requirements, and then delay it so much with their incompetent rollout that, like, none of these family farms that started and invested their life savings into, like, making this business model work are able to succeed. And we talked about that a few weeks ago, and it's happening in every state where they've done this. Oregon's an interesting case because they had a really long running history of, like, medical marijuana there. So these farms were able to pop up, something like California. And in some ways, like, it's been more devastating than in places that just went from basically nothing to, like, some form of legal regime for, recreational use, because like now suddenly you're jumping through like different sets of loopholes to be able to participate in this economy because they're like, oh, well, we got to be safe and we got to make sure that everything is like by the books. And we get like they regulated it to death and taxed it to death. So what do you get in return? You get the return of the cartels. Like it becomes profitable once again for the black market to emerge and for some nefarious characters to begin profiting from selling marijuana, a product that people want.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, there's another issue too, and that it allowed Big Pharma to capture a substantial part of the medicinal herb that is cannabis. Okay. They have captured derivatives by patenting derivatives of marijuana, which arguably is pretty freaking. I think I would say that is an abuse of proprietary technology. That's an abuse of intellectual property. People can make
there's
fillets on their own.
Yeah, I mean, there's that happens a bit in the ag industry. There's
Absolutely, sure,
yeah.
It does, and it's
and I'm not saying that's good. I'm just acknowledging it happens. No, but this stuff, and again, there's no excuse for it. Like by the time New York State rolled around, there's enough of these cases where like we should have known better. We knew what was going to happen if we rolled out recreational marijuana legalization in this way. We knew it was going to be a disaster. We knew that the black market would continue to emerge. We knew we'd continue pursuing the war on drugs, where in a lot of states where they've legalized marijuana, they've ended up arresting more young people for marijuana possession than they were prior to legalization, which is just wild. We've somehow gone backwards on this, despite like technically winning on legalization. It's
it's like they took this quasi ownership position that benefits no one. That they're like, we own this, we control it, do what we say, and whatever pittances of profit fall off, you may keep. And that's not capitalism. Okay, that's not real capitalism. That's real like feudalism. That's economic feudalism, and it's bullshit. We're not. Yeah, the radio's off, so I can tell. Shit. I don't know, man. I had a blast this show. This was good.
Yeah, it was a good show. It's funny. Like we're talking about this stuff. I'm going to share a podcast for some reason, talking about marijuana legalization and how a lot of these states have botched to roll out. Worth a listen to from a drug policy expert from the Sensible Drug Policy, or Students for a Sensible Drug Policy. But yeah, fun show, and yeah, I think we're probably going to call it a night, even though we didn't end up talking about the Siena poll, but I think it's time to call it a night.
Yeah, it's that's fair. The Siena poll was good though.
Yeah, maybe we'll talk about it next week.
Yeah, well, one metric, I think 35% of New Yorkers think that both Biden and Trump are not fit to rule the country, which gave me a tiny bit of hope about the reality, the political reality in New York State.
No, they're not thrilled about their options. Whether or not New York State will allow other options is a totally different matter.
Kennedy's going to be on the ballot.
Yeah, he probably will be. So there's your third option. The Libertarian Party. We'll see.
They made some mistakes.
It's going to be tough. We'll see if they make it. All right. Well, thanks again for joining us. Have a great night, folks. Take care.